let's talk just for a minute about our
Mhm.
mutual friend Rex Murphy, who passed away a few days ago. Share with us your thoughts on Rex and his passing.
Well, I like well, I shouldn't say all, but most journalists, I recognize Rex as a sort of a colossus over the years of Canadian journalism. He's done every medium. He owned Cross Country Checkup. That was a show that attracted upwards of 350,000 viewers, or listeners rather. And he would get the numbers like nobody in CBC's history. And when you look at the numbers they're getting today, which is kind of pathetic, it just shows you what could be and what was wonderful programming, and that really he was a very unifying force because he cared deeply about Canada. He came from Newfoundland. He brought a very different perspective from most of our Laurentian elites and most of the journalists who were kind of grew up in Ontario or Quebec or wherever, or even on the prairies. I just thought this is a guy who really cared about people. He really listened. He was really open to everybody's point of view. He respected people and they respected him. They loved him. He was a great speaker. He could speak on any topic, and did, to any number of people, of groups. He could speak to kings and he could speak to plumbers.
Mhm.
And he gave both the same respect and the same, um, you know, uh, um, he just wanted to share. He wanted to hear from them. And anyways, um, and his erudition, the on my tribute this morning, the National Post, they gave it the headline, "The People's Intellectual."
Right.
So I like that heading.
That's exactly right. Um, and I didn't forget about his role at Cross Country Checkup, and I'm just thinking about it now. And what I recall from that is how subordinate he made himself. He
Yes.
wanted to pull out of people from across the country their stories, and he let them go on quite long, longer than a
Hmm.
normal talk radio show. And maybe you could tell a little bit where he stood, but he was the servant on that show. He
He
wasn't the
was.
pontificator. He was surely smarter than 90% of the people he talked to,
Hmm.
but he had a respect for their humanity and their experience. And it was a cross country checkup. He did check in with the whole country. And in that way, I think he showed a love for the far flung regions that maybe someone born and raised in Toronto or Montreal might not so naturally do. I think that's part of his Newfoundland roots. And you're right about his erudition. He was an editor of a dictionary, and
Yeah,
and it
I believe so.
shows. It shows. Well, we
I
miss him.
think it was you. Somebody told me, a friend of mine said, Ezra Levant once visited Rex's house and said he'd never seen such a collection of dictionaries. Was that you? You never saw such a collection?
I did visit the house, and he had the full Oxford English Dictionary, the expanded version, which I think was like 20 volumes. It's been a while, I don't remember. And we were a little bit nerdy, so we tried to stump each other with words that the other guy wouldn't know. And I actually got him, which shocked me. Maybe he was just letting me win. The word was infandus. And the fact that I
I've never
remember,
heard that word. I have never.
apparently Rex, I don't believe that Rex didn't hear it. And I think he was just trying to let me feel better about myself.
I don't
He
think so because I have a pretty good vocabulary, and that is a word, Infandos.
DOUS, yeah, it's very similar to infamous. And yeah, I shouldn't be talking about that word infandus. It's just the only time I managed to know a word that Rex didn't. I mean, the man was a Rhodes Scholar. He knew
Yeah.
his Shakespeare better than anyone else. And but as you alluded to, he wasn't a snob. He wasn't elitist.
Mhm.
He was elite by every measure of the word, but he was not an elitist. He saw the wisdom in ordinary people. It was like Kipling's poem "If," as you mentioned before. He could talk with kings or with paupers, and and I don't. I can't. Rex would know that whole poem by heart, but
Of course
and
he would, and he would he could speak anywhere without notes, with complete fluency. A friend of mine told me that he was asked at the very last minute after October 7th. The rally in Ottawa was supposed to be addressed by, I think, somebody from the IDF. They couldn't make it, and they asked Rex. He stepped in and ex tempora, she said, gave the greatest speech. Uh, that was just incredible. And that reminds me that on his literal deathbed, his last two columns about the October 7th pogrom and the horrible aftermath of it, and the Trudeau government's failure to address the what was happening, the rise in anti-Semitism with honor or really even reason, was shaming for Canada. And his passion was undiminished, and it was within days of him dying. In fact, the last communication that the editor at the National Post had with him was when Rex wanted to make sure. He said, "Did you get my column? Is it going in?"
Wow. Wow.
And that was the last communication they had.
I was just looking down my phone for a second. I wanted to read just one line from Kipling's If, because this really is Rex. If you can talk with crowds and keep your virtue, or walk with kings, nor lose the common touch, if neither foes nor loving friends can hurt you, if all men count with you, but none too much, if you can fill the unforgiving minute with 60 seconds worth of distance run, yours is the earth and everything that's in it. And what is more, you'll be a man, my son. What a great poem by Kipling.
Yeah.
And of course, Rex would have known that by memory.
Would have known it, and that was Rex.
Yeah. Well, we miss him, but I was thinking about him on the weekend. We had a Rebel News Live event, and we played a montage, and I thought, how do you replace a giant like that? Well, part of the answer is he wasn't born a giant. He was born a baby, became a man, and he grew into the colossus that you described. He was still great 10 years ago and 20 years ago and 30 years ago, but he only turned into the man he is over time. And the replacement for Rex, the successor to Rex, doesn't appear like a snap. It grows over time, and I think everyone has to climb the next rung on the ladder. All of us have to grow one more rung, one more tree ring. And he really was a unique person, but I think all of us can step up and take some of the burden and continue the mission he did. At least that's
Well,
how
he's
I'm
certainly
trying
an
to.
inspiration. I hope that young journalists, that his passing will be an occasion for young journalists to take an interest in his work, to look back at some of his columns and his radio work, and reflect on the qualities that made him gladden the hearts
Mhm.
of Canadians and make them proud to be Canadian along with him. So I hope that his legacy will be an inspiration for young journalists coming up.